Thank you for having me. I'm just amazed by this. It seems like I'm going back in time. So this house is from 1851?
You may not know this, but my wife and I bought it in 1976. We were the third owners of this duplex, which was built in 1850, according to records. And I want to welcome everybody into my home.
That's so nice.
Now, it has some history that goes back to the Civil War. We fell in love with it just as soon as we saw it. It was exactly what we wanted. We wanted a project, and we got a project. It was a lot of work, Stuart. A lot of work ahead of us, but we enjoyed every minute of it. And along the way, we, of course, met our neighbors and found out that Judge Embry and I were at the same party next door one afternoon, and he said, you recently bought that property? I said, yeah, I just recently bought it. May I see it? And
your neighbor wanted to come in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we walked to the house, and as we left and stood on the stoop, he said, you know, Howard, pointed up to the corner with all the apartments, he said, those apartments weren't there all the time. They were much more recent. And I said, yeah, I figured. He said there used to be 3 houses down to the corner. My grandmother lived in the 3rd house and enjoyed coming out on the porch in the afternoon, late afternoon, and just taking a breather for the day. And she said she often saw Traveler in front of the house. And Lee generally come into the house, and occasionally Jackson come into the house. Now, back in those days, how did they feed the troops? Off the economy. If you were an officer, you were invited by the upper class citizens, which are the owners of this house at that particular time, in for dinner. And I can well imagine when they would come in for dinner, they would take a seat much like where you are, Stuart, and you, and have a highball before dinner, and then retreat to the dining room.
Yeah.
And sit around and do their best to get away from the war, the rigors of the war, and the fatigue of the war. And I would imagine at that point that Lee had a pretty fair idea of how the war was going to go.
Yeah.
And he was a gentleman through and through, distinguished in every way, that white hair flowing, and that gray cape.
Yeah.
Anyway, they used to supper here on more than one occasion, as I understand from the history of it.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased that Stuart, you came in and want to photograph, and I'll give me a chance to tell what I know and get it on tape, and then for other people to see it and enjoy it. Another question they asked me about this house is it haunted? You lean forward, you kind of whisper in your ear, is it haunted?
Yeah.
And I said, you're talking to the wrong person right now. You ought to talk to my wife. She would answer in the affirmative.
Yeah.
Yes, it is haunted. She calls a friend from Northern Virginia who's a lay minister. And he and his wife come down, and they walk to the house and to get the feeling of the house, whether it had ghosts or not. And I had just had an car accident, and I was rehabbing upstairs bedroom and sitting by a window where I had thrown the sash up. It was a nice, beautiful day. And he came upstairs and he brought his Bible, which happened to be one of the great big thick Bibles, very impressive. And he was standing in the door jamb and looking around the room. And he took the Bible and he stood up. "Ghost be gone!" And I was sitting by the window and I felt the air in the room rush by me. It so unnerved me, my hair on my arms stood up. And I found myself sort of panting. And my lovely wife was sitting next to me, and in her eyes she had felt the same thing. And over the years, I poo-pooed, and you know, but I always saw something move in the periphery of my vision. I see something that would be a flickering. And it would look something like him, Jeremy. Look something not as defined as you see with the belts, but something like that unusually shaped cap and the gray uniform. And so when she had it exercised, things were sort of quiet, and particularly in my family. But then in contemporary times, I tell you, when my wife would come to bed, you know, the room was dark, and she would invariably hit the bed with her knees before she climbed into it. And I always felt, all is well, all is well. And you know, the other night I laid there and I was looking out the window, and just before falling asleep, getting in that real mellow mood before sleep. And Stuart, I mean to tell you, I said, all is well. Come on, girl, get in bed. Yeah. Now, I don't know, you know, I'm a non-believer, I don't know. It could be my wants. I want her back so badly. And I could have just wished her back, you know. But I don't give a rat's ass. I really don't. Yeah. I had the experience, right. And that was well worth it. Yeah. That was well worth it.
Oh, that's great.